I'm Dale Lawrence. Welcome to the Travel Show. Thanks for joining us. Later in the show, I'll be talking to Richard Chapman, General Manager of the Sheraton Grand Sukhumvit Hotel here in Bangkok. Richard's one of Bangkok's most experienced hoteliers and also a lover of jazz music. We'll be bringing you the latest news from travel, tourism and aviation around the region. But first, the second part of my interview with the interim CEO of the Pacific Asia Travel Association. Now, PART is looking for a new chief executive. This next appointment will be the fifth CEO in less than 3 years. Last year, the association recorded a loss of over $400,000 US. Put another way, that's about $600 for every paid-up member of the association. So is PART at a crisis point? Join me after the break when once again Bill Calderwood goes on the record.
Few things could be more exhilarating than flying through the treetops. The famous flight of the gibbons in Chiang Mai is both fun and educational with an ecological bonus. You will be suspended on a cable and flown from treetop to treetop. You can also go tandem, just like our cousins the gibbons. Then, after the natural highs, wind down with a delicious hot brew in Mat Kampong district while enjoying the beautiful nature around you.
Bill Calderwood, thanks for joining me again. Bill, last week we discussed some of the challenges and opportunities facing travel and tourism across the Asia-Pacific region. Let's turn to the many challenges now facing your association, the association that you're now heading up. You're the fourth CEO in less than 3 years. You're in the hot seat only on an interim basis. You're stating repeatedly you don't want to stay here full-time for personal and for family reasons. I think everyone would understand. But what's preventing you finding a full-time replacement? Is it the reputation of the PART executive board, for example, described by one journalist as a group of hobby strategists? I mean, does this put off potentially good candidates, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a very unfortunate phrase. I certainly wouldn't agree with that. I think it ignores the reality that there's very, very many successful business people sitting around the table who have been very successful over many years running their own businesses. So I think that is a very dismissive comment, which is unfortunate. I think what's taking the time is a process which I'm working through. I agreed to take on this role as an interim role only, and I've said from day one that's the focus. What it does, it gives me a unique opportunity in many ways to have a look at the organisation in some ways as an outsider and to give an honest assessment of the operation and where it should be going. And at the same time to provide recommendations on the type of style and skill set which the new CEO should have, and also the way in which the organisation, including the board, needs to adjust its thinking. The CEO process is early days. We have to work that through together with the company who is working with us on that. But I'm very confident that we will find a very good candidate. The reality is PATA as a brand name is still very strong. The challenges and the opportunities which this particular role presents excites a lot of people for the right reasons. And we're only looking for people who actually have a vision for the future, people who understand and have a realistic viewpoint about the challenges we face and who are not daunted by that.
Now, I guess as a member of the party executive board, and I want to clarify this point without, I mean, it's slightly confusing that you should be a member of the executive board and also be the interim CEO reporting to the board that you sit on, Bill. So just clarify that for
Indeed,
us.
I was a member of the executive board. I no longer am a member of the executive board. When I took on this role, I resigned from that. You need a separation of power, and you need transparency, and that was very clear. Just as I've said from day one, I'm not a candidate for the role. Therefore, I can look at it dispassionately in many different ways. Likewise, I have a very clear focus on the necessary governance and separation, and we've made sure that's been followed through.
Yes, except for your website, which still says you are a member of the executive board.
That's something which we may have to address.
Yes, indeed. And one other point which has been talked about on online forums and what have you, it says that 2 previously unsuccessful applicants for the role of CEO, Parter, are now part of the appraisal process. I mean, is this true?
Not true.
No. Okay.
Not true. Anytime an organisation brings in a new CEO, it's a critical time. Yes, it is a critical time for PATA because of the changing landscape, if you like, of associations and the way in which people in changing their behaviour as far as doing business see different needs and different values from an organisation. PATA has to change. PATA is changing. PATA has to do business in different ways. We are doing exactly that. PATA has to demonstrate its relevance. That's what we're working on. And PATA has to make sure that people understand what we can actually deliver and create realistic expectations. I can't have one part of the organisation over here doing this and not being consistent with that. So there's a very strong focus at the present time, making sure that all the team is linked such that we have one message, one voice, one focus, one PATA.
And you set that out in a strategic document, didn't you, Bill, published back in April, with your name at the bottom.
Yes.
And I have to say, it read very well. And I mean, you've set a very, very high target for yourselves, haven't you, in terms of what you want to achieve this year, in terms of membership retention. I think you set a figure of 87%, growing revenue by 12%. And you need to do that because, I mean, you inherited a loss of $419,000 for 2010. So it would suggest that you need to bring in some extra revenue, particularly from the sort of the higher value members. It used to be called Premier Partners, for example.
What we have tried to do since the beginning of this year is to lay out a very realistic scenario to let people understand very clearly where the organisation is, also where it needs to move to. Ambitious? Of course it's ambitious. Why would you not try and deliver something which makes sense? Realistic? It is realistic. And the effort now at the present time is actually making sure we put prioritisation on key programs to start to deliver and start to move forward. The most important thing, and this is the importance of listening to your members. We are a membership organisation. Our strengths are in that membership and the networking. You have to listen to what they said to us, and they told us very clearly. Make us understand very clearly what you do. Tell us what your competitive advantage is, and then make sure you deliver things which are relevant. That's a very simple direction and guideline which I'm looking at and following and making sure that the team's focused on as well.
Indeed. With that in mind and the whole focus upon membership, Bill, were you surprised when you arrived here in Bangkok as the interim CEO that there was no membership department apart and no membership director? I mean, it's rather strange for an organisation almost wholly dependent upon membership revenues for it to be lacking such a department, isn't it?
Yes, I was surprised. And what have we done? We've advertised and the recruitment process is well underway. And we will have those 2 roles, a Director of Marketing and Membership and also a Regional Director for Asia, in place.
Another role that's been vacant for about 2 years.
Indeed. And quite frankly, I think it's an unfortunate gap which is about to be fixed.
Members might be slightly concerned that the organisation, I mean, you've only got just over 30 staff, just going to be a little bit top heavy. I mean, one wonders why such a small organisation needs 1 CEO and 2 deputy CEOs, for example.
Let's have a look at what those particular functions do. And the 2 people you refer to specifically look after the event. One looks after the events area, one looks after the the strategic marketing area, and that's where their speciality is, and that's where they're focusing. So that's what they're charged to do. That's what they'll be held accountable for. Let's not let titles get in the way. It's their KPI, their responsibility, which they have to deliver on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're actually downgrading the sort of seniority of the regional directors, aren't you, which at the moment reports to the CEO, but under the new structure will report to the Director of Marketing and Membership.
I'm not downgrading it at all. Their responsibility will not change. In fact, in my time, we are making them more accountable to deliver in certain areas. The reporting line is
membership recruitment being one of them, presumably?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Membership servicing, membership retention, membership recruitment. Their role has not been downgraded. In fact, we're trying to make sure that we actually get better value from the knowledge that those particular regional directors have. The reporting line will change, but their responsibility certainly won't change.
We'll come back and talk more after the break, Bill, about some of the challenges facing the new CEO whenever he or she is appointed. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
Welcome back. I'm talking to Bill Corderwood, Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association. When the new CEO's on board, he or she has got a whole pile of issues to address fairly early on in the role, particularly the challenge of membership, because the numbers of members has been dropping, hasn't it? I mean, you're down to what, between 700 and 800 paid up members for this year. Is that drop in numbers, is it a reflection of Parta's sort of waning influence, if you like, people moving on and doing other things, or is there a more fundamental reason?
There's a couple of reasons. I think the role that PATA played, or was designed to play when it was established 60 years ago, it evolves, it changes. We discussed before the way in which different organisations mature, and therefore the need for them to engage PATA in certain areas wanes, and in other areas it increases.
Yes.
And also the way in which the social media, the digital revolution, it changes the way in which people research, the way people communicate, they transact, etc. We have something like 755 organisations who are members of PATA at the present time. But that's the tip of the iceberg.
How many people do they all employ, I wonder?
Good question. Well, let me give you an example. 3 of those 755 companies are 3 very large hotel companies. They combined have something like 9,000 hotels around the world.
And several 100,000 employees.
450,000 employees.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the important thing. The potential, the reach you can get through the membership is far more important than people give recognition for.
Those younger people employed now throughout the tourism and travel aviation sectors are tomorrow's business leaders, the ones that would be making the decision on whether to join PATA
Indeed.
or to renew membership fees. You've got to embrace them now, haven't you?
Indeed, and let's talk about the opportunity, right? The opportunity is very much to try and embrace the new professionals coming through, the leaders of tomorrow, and to find a way in which we can actually excite them and engage them. They're not interested in coming and sitting around a table. That's not the way in which they communicate. They're communicating online. PATA, likewise, has to be able to find a way in which we can actually communicate with them in that way.
Another role for the CEO, influencing Asia-Pacific tourism travel policies, strategies and development, which is fairly grand sort of.
Very grand.
I mean, give me a recent. I mean, you have a Office of Strategic Management at Parter now, but I mean, give me an example of strategic intelligence that's come out of Parter recently, as opposed to, you know, regurgitated visitor arrival numbers, which no one would argue is particularly strategic. I mean, it's time consuming in terms of making sense of it all, but you wouldn't argue it's necessarily strategic.
We recently, and a very good example, within the last 3 weeks, there was a publication issued under the Issues and Trends banner, which looked at the whole phenomenon of cruise market. And that wasn't about data and telling you how many people were here and coming. It was looking at the phenomenon and the potential and the implication of this and what the implication was in terms of, you know, itinerary design, infrastructure issues. And this is, let me tell you, this is a segment which has got the attention of many governments and many national tourism offices right through the region.
Bill, just cast your mind back to April, the Parter 60th anniversary celebrations and conference in Beijing. I mean, were you tempted to can the whole thing and say, look, you know, we tried, but we just haven't succeeded here? Or was it a question of, you know, not losing face either in Thailand or in China?
We looked at a lot of different scenarios, but quite frankly, the option of cancelling it would not have been a good option. If the temptation to cancel had been followed through, it would have delivered the wrong message in a lot of different ways.
The event paled into insignificance in comparison with previous sort of anniversary events where Parter had attracted the likes of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, President George Bush, Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut. I mean, there was no speakers of real significance at the conference, and your numbers didn't make. I mean, the Parter website was saying, you know, over 1,000 delegates are going to be in Beijing, and I mean, you were nowhere near that, were you?
Yes, we were. At the opening ceremony, there was 1,000 delegates.
And how many? And how many of those had paid to attend, though, Bill? That's the issue, isn't it?
The majority had paid. Not everyone, but the majority paid. Let's be realistic about a conference. Yeah, the dynamics of a conference are such that you often see a situation where numbers wax and wane, and also not everyone's paying to attend a conference. Some of that is driven by the host country inviting different delegates of theirs, and that's, you've got to give them that opportunity to respect. So let's not get hung up on that. We have to recognise that the days around the world of large conferences are no longer as relevant as they used to be. We have to go to our members, we have to go to the destinations, to the travel hubs, and talk to people on their ground, rather than expect that people can afford or have the desire to give up 4 or 5 days of their time in the future.
Yeah.
People don't do business that way anymore.
So there won't be a Parter conference in 2012 then?
There will be a meeting, which will be a congress in 2012, and it will be a combination of things. There'll be
You'll have to explain to me, Bill, the difference between a conference and a congress. I mean, what's the difference as far as the average Parter member is concerned?
The event will be primarily run over a weekend. It will be a 3-day program. During that 3 days, there will be the certain sort of housekeeping activities, whether it be the AGM or the board meeting or the executive meeting or the chapter meeting. But there will also be a 1-day program, of conference program. So there'll be 3 distinct modules. And during that, it'll be a very tight program in terms of looking at specific issues.
Talking of events, Bill, now the Parter Travel Mart, coming up in September, isn't it? In New Delhi this year.
Yes.
And you've already announced it's going to be in Manila next year.
Yes.
But this is an event that's losing money, and I think it might be fair to say that popularity is waning in the way that membership has been dropping. Is that type of travel mart sort of coming to the end of its useful life, do you think?
Only if it doesn't evolve. And I think the challenge there is to actually recognise the value it delivers. And it is a business-to-business opportunity, it is a networking opportunity, but also it's a great opportunity for destinations to be able to showcase themselves, and more importantly perhaps, for them to be able to showcase products which normally would not get to a destination. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about whether an event like Parter Travel Mart should be anchored in one location, or should
as indeed it was for several years.
As it was indeed. But the reality is, if you listen to your membership once again, there's a very clear message. They see value in an event like Pata Travel Mart coming to their destination so they can showcase, so they can present their product.
Finally, Bill, Pata's future. Clearly you hope that by the time that you depart and the new CEO's in place, that the whole organisation will be in slightly better shape. You'll have a solid management team in place that you will have helped to recruit. What would be your message, your principal message to an organisation that's either thinking about renewing its membership of Pata or joining for the first time?
Yep, indeed. I think we're trying to make the communication simple. The message very simply to any current member or prospective member is the core focus and the core delivery of Pata is to build your business. And everything which we do and say must be focused towards that end. And quite frankly, the message within the organisation nowadays is if you can't demonstrate to me that that activity is building the business, we're not doing it. There is evolution in our events, there's evolution in the way in which the insights have been given. There'll be evolution in the way in which the strategic issues we're looking at are going to help our members work through some of the barriers to growth. And there'll be evolution and also in the way in which we actually take advocacy positions. The issue with Pata is if it didn't change, it would die. It is changing. And when I leave, I hope very simply that we will have cemented the foundation of those changes and that new thinking. And I think I'm seeing within the reaction from the team and from the board that everyone understands that, embraces it. And I certainly would believe that the new team coming in will be of that mindset as well.
Bill Goddard, we wish you well in building that foundation. Thank you once again for going on the record.
Thank you.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
The Thai Travel Agents Association president wants the new ruling political party in Thailand to recognise the importance of tourism. Chalan Wangananong told online travel industry news service TTR that the Pheu Thai party should take charge of the Ministry of Tourism and Sports, rather than allocate it to a less influential party in the new government coalition. Boutique airline Bangkok Airways is offering promotional hotel room rates for passengers flying on domestic routes to Chiang Mai, Samui, Phuket, Krabi and Trat. The Stay in Style Fly Boutique campaign runs until August 31st, and the airline is also running a consumer competition with flights and accommodation as the prizes.
Take a trip somewhere a little different and hop on a boat to experience the cool breeze around Chiao Lan Reservoir. Officially known as Ratchaprapha Dam, the reservoir contains water from the Klong Sang River in Chiao Lan village, Ban Ta Khun district in Surat Thani. This earth-filled dam with a clay core has become a hot tourist attraction right now with a range of adventure activities like rock climbing and rafting. The beautifully wide lake here is fast becoming known as Thailand's Guilin. Under the supervision of Khao Sok National Park, this waterway also has a charmingly romantic atmosphere.
Now, one of the many popular features here at the Sheraton Grand Sukhumvit Hotel in Bangkok is the live jazz here in the living room. And joining me is the General Manager, Richard Chapman. Richard, welcome to the travel show. Now, I don't think it's any secret that it's your personal love of jazz that's created this whole phenomenon, if you like, of live jazz music here every night of the week.
Absolutely, every night of the week. Yes, if I go back 11 years to when I first came here, the living room was very popular for after-office cocktails. By 9 o'clock, the place was deserted. So I called up my old friend LD Young, who was down in Singapore at the time. I said, LD, come up and have a look at this space. Do you think we can turn this into a jazz club? He came over and he said, what fantastic acoustics. He said, it's going to be marvelous. So a few months later, we kicked off in February 2001, and we've been going strong ever since. The living room and the jazz is certainly amongst the top 3 USPs, mentioned time and time again by our guests. One of the roles of a hotel is to put on attractions, events and so on for the local community as well as for the hotel guests.
You mentioned LD Young, of course, and he very sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But you're still attracting big names here, aren't you? And it's a relatively small venue. I'm not sure, how many covers have we got here? 100 or so?
Yeah, about 100.
Yes.
Comfortably
to make it
100.
Yes, indeed. And yet, you're getting big names. Ernie Watts was here recently, the very famous saxophonist.
Yes, it was his 5th visit. He loves coming here, and we love having him here. And of course, now he's established his own following. So whenever he's in town, we're going to have a full house.
Let's just move away from jazz because you say that's one of the hotel's USPs, but it's not the only one. You're operating in an intensely competitive environment now, aren't you, Richard? Look at the construction going on around you. You have a fantastic situation, a location here in Bangkok at the Asok Sukhumvit interchange. You've got your own access to the SkyTrain rail network, but the competition is ever increasing, isn't it? What are you doing to protect your market share?
Well, naturally, the whole time we have to be going out and exploring the opportunities of new sources of business. 40% of our business is corporate travelers. So we're always knocking on the door of new organizations, new companies who will have visiting colleagues coming into town. On the leisure side, we see a tremendous shift from the traditional markets of Western Europe, Australia, into the more regional traveling market out of India, China, Korea, and Japan is still surprisingly strong in spite of what they went through in March.
Another group of travelers that's seemingly wanting to get away, the Chinese. And we've just heard a prediction that by 2015, China will be the world's largest source market for tourism. Now, what are you doing here to get ready for the Chinese invasion?
Well, already we've hired our first full-time Chinese guest relations officer, who's now learning Thai feverishly, so she can take on the dual role of not only welcoming Thai guests to the hotel, but also in particular our Chinese visitors. And we also have a salesman who's specializing in the Chinese market.
Amazing Thailand always amazes you.
Well, that's it for this week's show. My thanks to Richard Chapman from the Sheraton Grand Sukhumvit Hotel in Bangkok, to Bill Calderwood from the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and to the Dusit Thani Hotel. Next week we're in Hua Hin, but until then, from everyone on the Travel Show, is goodbye.